I would like to welcome all of you here to Dalum. Today we will hear two nice presentations. One from Thomas Thymann from University of Copenhagen. He will tell us about the cross field between humans and pigs and how to treat the small piglets and what we can do to make them survive. And also after that, my colleague Sanne will have a nice presentation with good tips and tricks for the better survivability of these small piglets. Out there we sent to Brønderslev and Agerskov and Holstebro as well. So if you have any questions for this session, then make a question on the chat. I will follow the meeting on the chat, and you can write them there, and I will present the questions here. Okay, so welcome all of you, and welcome to Thomas. You will be the first speaker here. Okay.
So, thank you, Paul, for that very nice introduction. My name is Thomas Thymann. I'm from University of Copenhagen, and I am a veterinarian and animal scientist of my background, and I've been studying with Paul many years ago, and playing football with Paul also many years ago. Not so many years ago. But anyway, I work in a group called Comparative Pediatrics, and that terminology is supposed to indicate that comparative means that we are comparing different animal species, and pediatrics indicates that we are interested in the very early life for both animals but also humans. So I lead this group of comparative pediatrics. We are currently 26 employees, a mixture of veterinarians, animal scientists, and human medical doctors and pharmacists and biochemists and engineers and so forth. But we share all the interest in the very early life and what we can do about mortality and sickness in very early life. And as I will try to allude to in my presentation here, even though we call ourselves comparative, and that could be across many animal species, there are really only two species that we focus on mainly, and that is pigs as one species and human babies as the other species. And we do that because pigs and human infants share many physiological traits, also anatomical traits. So we can learn things from piglets that can be used in humans, but we can also learn things from humans that we can use in pig production. So we'll try to talk about both things, and I'll try to present it in a way that it can be used as an inspiration for you when you work in the farrowing farms across Denmark. So how do we improve survival of the weakest newborn piglets? That is really the title of this presentation. And veterinary comparative pediatrics, as I mentioned, could go across different animal species. And if we look at animal species that can bear a litter, and what I'm referring to here is for example, cats. They are a litter-bearing animal species. Dogs are also a litter-bearing animal species, and also pigs. So many fetuses per mother, you may say. And one complication for these three animal species is that by having this many fetuses per mother, that associates with a very high mortality. And those mortality rates are actually quite similar for cats and dogs and pigs, and it's high. So it's higher than in cows, it's higher than in horses, it's higher than in sheep and goats. But some of the reason why there is such high mortality in these litter-bearing animal species is because there are multiple fetuses. And there are some reasons why that is a complication by itself. And I'll get back to that in just a second. So high mortality rates, and we don't hear about high mortality rates in cats and dogs in the media. We always hear about pigs, but it's actually quite similar for dogs and cats. Anyway, If we look at pig production and we look at mortality rates, this is now data ranging from 2011 to 2020. And we have the percentage of stillborn, it's around 10%, and it's really unchanged since 2011. And also if we add the mortality rate from birth to weaning, it is really stable. I mean, it's high and constant. And if you look at a graph like this, we must admit to ourselves that mortality rate has not gone down. It's gone a little down and it's gone up again, and maybe it's going down a little bit again, but the overall picture is that mortality rates in pigs is constantly high. So, and it's not that, I mean, you work in farrowing barns, you do everything you can to make them survive. And I think over the years here, for these 10 years, there's been a lot of effort trying to reduce mortality in newborn pigs, different feeding strategies, different arrangement of the farrowing pen and housing conditions and whatnot. But we must just say that it's been really difficult to really break this line. It's been constant and it's been high. And that tells us that we are dealing with a biological problem that is difficult to solve. So to really bring down mortality rates in pigs or in cats or in dogs, we have to go to other measures than we normally use. And what I'll try to argue in my presentation is that the only way to reduce mortality in weak newborn pigs, we'll have to bring them into a safe external environment for maybe 48 hours and feed them with an artificial colostrum replacer. And I'll try to argue that during my presentation and hopefully discuss it with you afterwards. So, what is the reason why we have this high mortality? Well, maybe it's not so surprising. If we look at the birth process itself, we go from a situation, and if you look at the picture up in the left corner, that little square is a picture of a pig fetus. So a fetus before it's born, this is what they look like. While they are a fetus, they are in a constant temperature, about 39 centigrades inside the uterus of the pregnant sow. They are getting all their nutrients via the umbilical cord, also all the oxygen via the umbilical cord. It's sterile. There's no viruses and bacteria, so they cannot get infected, almost. But it's a very safe and constant environment for a fetus to be in. So they are basically all alive at the time of birth. Then the birth takes place, and that's referring now to the lower picture there. And immediately after birth, they have to take their first breath. So the lungs have to expand, and they take their first breath. And for that to occur requires a number of organ changes in both the heart and the lungs, so they can exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. Also, they start to get all their nutrients via the milk and via the intestine instead of via the umbilical cord. So there is no other time point in life where we have this marked or this radical change in body function as we have during birth. So no wonder that in most cases it goes fine, but in some cases it doesn't go as fine, and we have complications and some die. So for you and for me and everybody else, the concept is then to, okay, what can we do about the ones that are weak after birth and do not tolerate the birth process as well? What can we do to help them survive? So going back down to the comparative pediatrics indications here, the cat and the dog and the pig, very similar species. And now let's try to compare with a species where we have high survival and we only have one fetus per mother, and that's this species. So this is my wife and our oldest son many years ago. So in cases with humans, we have only, in most cases at least, we have only one fetus per mother. So you would think when you have only one fetus per mother, then the fetus is developing gradually, and then at some stage birth can take place, and normally that is without any complications, and the child survives, no problem. But if you look at, and this is now a very stylistic presentation of how a fetus is developing, a human fetus. This is a diagram that was produced by Peter Nathaniels from New York. And what this is supposed to show is that here is a fetus, a human fetus, that is saying, am I ready yet? Where is the checklist for what I need out there? Lungs, gut, kidneys, eyes and ears and arms and legs, and all working well, and of course also my brain. So what they're trying to say here is that as fetuses develop from being very small fetuses to being a full-born fetus ready to be born, that requires that all these organ systems are working. If some of these organ systems are not working, then we have what we call a weak newborn. So just imagine that with humans, when there's only one fetus per mother, you would think that there should be a very good coordination between the fetus and the mother in terms of when the birth can take place. So at some stage, the fetus is developed enough, and then there's a signal between mother and fetus that now birth can take place. And that is also the case in most cases, but even in our species, we have about 10% what we call preterm deliveries. So about 10% of all pregnancies end with a preterm birth, or prematurity, we call them. So when a child is born preterm, we call them premature infants, and they suffer from a number of complications, including organ systems that are not fully developed. In pig barns, we cannot really see if they are term or preterm, because it cannot be seen with the eye. But if the case in human is that we have 10% preterm deliveries, then it's very unlikely that would not also be the case for pigs. So if you go to the pig species, we not only have one fetus, we have maybe 20 or 25 fetuses. So it's very easy to imagine that when you have 25 fetuses, that there must be some discoordination between the fetuses and the mother in terms of when the birth should take place. And this is very hard to put data to, and it's very hard to prove it, but just think of it as a working hypothesis that maybe some fetuses require 115 days to be full term and fully ready to be born. Others may require only 113 days, or some may require 116 or 118 days. So if birth takes place on day 115, then maybe one pig is 2 days overdue, one pig is maybe 1 day premature, and another pig is maybe 3 days premature. So what I'm trying to say is that when we have these litter-bearing animals, dogs, cats, pigs, there must be a variation in the degree of maturity for all these fetuses. So when you see them in the morning as you come into the farrowing house, you cannot see who is preterm and who is term. That cannot be seen, but you can see who is weak and not weak. And I think some of that weakness is really due to prematurity. So that's one complication, and I'll try to argue why there's a couple of complications that lead to death and what to do about them. But just think of prematurity as one of the complications. So what does it really mean to be a weak newborn, and what characterizes the organ function of a weak newborn, and how can we correct this condition? This is really the key problem that you are dealing with every day. What can we do to correct it? And I'll try to, in the end of my presentation, come with a suggestion of what you can do. So prematurity is one risk factor. Another risk factor that I present here, and also Sanne will present later, is the obvious low body size piglets that you can see that they are low body weight. And this is some very old data from a German group back in 1998, where they showed here on the x-axis pig birth weights ranging from 800 grams to the left there, and then up to 2.2 kilograms. And the axis on the left indicates mortality, indicated here with the red dots. So it represents mortality rates. It also represents the number of minutes a pig takes to get to the mammary gland and start suckling. So it has a double representation. So So what happens is that if we say an 800-gram low body weight piglet is born, well, there's a high mortality rate of approximately 50%. But also you can see that the time to find a teat and start suckling is about 70 minutes for a low body weight piglet of 800 grams. So 70 minutes, and then you can see as body weight starts to increase, they get faster and faster. So in other words, after birth, a small pig has difficulties finding the teat. A larger pig has more access or gets quicker to the teat. And why am I saying this? Is because the quicker they get to the teat, the better the chances of getting mother's colostrum and becoming fully immunized and survive. So this is a burden of being a small pig. It takes a long time to get to the mammary gland, and survival is very low. And then also the axis to the right indicates the change in body temperature. And as you can see here, with the green square, a low body weight pig of 800 grams loses approximately 4 centigrades of body temperature. So they lose quicker temperature than higher body weight siblings do. So they have a number of complications. They lose temperature, and they have difficulties finding the mammary gland, and they are not receiving all the colostrum that they could have if they were bigger. So therefore, mortality rates are high for low body weight pigs. So why do pigs die in the first place? And there's been many data to indicate what is the exact diagnosis of death among pigs out there. And this pie chart indicates that crushing is the most important. 47% of all dead pigs is from crushing. 18% is from starvation. Another 18% is from weakness. And then there are some minor causes of death that you can see there. Infection, gut inflammation, infection, sepsis, constipation, failure to thrive, and so forth, but they're less important. But we can maybe think of these causes of death as the ultimate. So this is maybe the ultimate causes of death. But what is more interesting is that why did they die from these causes of death? So what are the fundamental biological problems leading them to die from either starvation or weakness or even crushing? That is, as far as I can see, the more important thing. And that leads me to another important risk factor. So we talked about prematurity as one risk, another being small body weight, and then a third risk factor is to be born with too little oxygen. And what does it mean to be born with too little oxygen? Well, it's not so easy to study, but we went out on a farm and took blood samples from the umbilical cord of approximately 100 pigs before they took their first breath. And then you can take blood samples, and from that blood sample you can analyze if they have been exposed to too little oxygen during birth. If they have received too little oxygen during birth, they may die. So all the stillborns that you see under farming conditions is from too little oxygen during birth. So they were not always dead, so they die during the birth process. And then among the ones that are born alive, surely some of them have suffered from too little oxygen during birth. And this is the data that also indicates it. So we found that when we look at the level of lactate, and lactate is an acid that goes up if they have too little oxygen. If we look at that relative to their body weight, we find that low body weight pigs of 400 grams, 0.0 kilograms to 2 kilograms to the right, we find that little pigs have more lactoacidosis. So lactoacidosis indicating that they are suffering from too little oxygen. So they are suffering more when they are small body weight compared with larger body weight pigs. So in that sense, you can say that small pigs are really suffering from a double burden. They are small, but they're also suffering from more lactoacidosis compared with larger siblings. And no wonder that they die. and what is the problem of getting too little oxygen? You may say, because they were born, and they start to breathe, and then they can quickly correct their CO2 and their oxygen, but having been exposed to too little oxygen during birth is enough to make brain damage, intestinal damage, kidney damage. So therefore, it's a severe complication, and we have to understand this complication before we can find out how to correct it. So the reason why little pigs take longer to get to the mammary gland, as you saw in that previous graph, the 70 minutes, I would think, this is just a hypothesis, I would think it's because they are lactoacidotic. And if you have received too little oxygen during birth, one of the organs that is suffering from that is the brain. And if the brain is suffering from too little oxygen, they cannot coordinate their movements, and they cannot find balance, and they have more difficulties finding their way to the teat. And then starts a cascade of bad events: not finding the way to the teat, not being able to compete with bigger siblings, not being able to get enough mother's colostrum, and then simply dying from either starvation or crushing afterwards. So what I'm trying to get at is that relative to these ultimate causes of death, crushing, starvation, weakness, and so forth, what appears to be more interesting is that there are really three predisposing factors, and that is prematurity, it's low body weight, and it's birth acidosis that lead to these factors. So if you and everybody else wants to improve survival, you have to focus on this rather than this. So what can we do about prematurity? Not much, because you cannot see it, and you don't know who is premature, but at least knowing it is just increasing that awareness, that knowing that some of the pigs are weak, probably because they're preterm. At least understanding it is important. Low body weight, what can we do about it? Not much. Well, you can do breeding programs and so forth, but in any litter-bearing animal species, there's going to be low body weight newborn animals, in this case pigs. And then birth acidosis, what can we do about that? Not much. Again, in litter-bearing animals, when they are being born, it takes quite a number of hours, so some of them will be exposed to birth acidosis. So for you as employees in farrowing houses, you need to know what to do about them. I mean, you cannot prevent them, but you can correct them once they are there. And I'll get back to why that is. So we have tried to, under experimental conditions at the University of Copenhagen, to look at what does it mean if you're born very preterm. So we deliver pigs by cesarean section on day 106 of pregnancy. So that's very preterm. And we do not give them mother's colostrum. So therefore they are very vulnerable, they're very weak, but we try to find out what can we do to very weak piglets under those conditions. And to do that, there's a number of things that can be done, and I won't go into much detail with that, but just say that if there is a system where you can bring weak pigs into security, away from the sow, so they are safe from crushing, they are safe from starvation, there's a chance for survival. So even under these conditions where you are born 12 days before expected term date and you do not get your mother's colostrum, there can be 100% survival as long as food is provided and the housing conditions are sanitary and the temperature is right. Just for inspiration, this is, of course, experimental condition, and we do this with the purpose of trying to identify what is good for preterm human infants. But we can also take these learnings and use them under farming conditions, and I'll try to argue in a little while why that is. So how to handle the newborn pigs? We have to understand how their organ systems respond to different treatments, and I'll show now one example of a treatment that could be relevant for you under farrowing conditions, and we try to understand what does this do in terms of bone function, brain function, immune function. This thing over there is to represent a white blood cell, lung function, heart function, and the pancreas function. liver, stomach, intestine, and also kidney function. So all these important body functions need to work. If they don't work, there's a high risk of death. So the one thing we have tried to look at is the influence of being born with too little oxygen. We've also studied a lot what does it mean to be born preterm. We've also studied what does it mean to be born with too little body weight. But I'll just give one example here of a study where we exposed pigs to either normal oxygen during birth or too little oxygen during birth to try and make a situation that is comparable to what you see under farrowing conditions. So to do that, I'll show you in a minute, we had a system where we could manipulate the level of oxygen, and then after birth, we gave them what we call a colostrum replacer. So to survive after birth for both calves and lambs and pigs, they require access to their mother's colostrum. And that is crucial. You can partly give colostrum replacers from other animal species. So you can take colostrum from a donkey or a camel or a cow and give it to a pig, and it will have beneficial effects compared with another commercial milk replacer. But it's not as beneficial as colostrum from the pig species itself. So we need to understand if we can make an artificial colostrum that can mimic the effects of pig colostrum. And this is what we try to call the colostrum replacer. And we've tried to work with this, and we have a suggestion what a pig-specific colostrum replacer could be. So the study in brief was to look at what is the effect of getting too little oxygen during birth. And to do that, we made surgical access to pig fetuses during pregnancy. And we clamped the cord, the umbilical cord, that little blue thing you can see there is a clamp. So we clamped the umbilical cord for 8 minutes in half of the litter. And in the other half, we didn't do anything. So after 8 minutes, they were born. And that means that now half of the litter has gotten too little oxygen and the other half has gotten enough oxygen during birth. And after birth, we gave them a diet that was either a colostrum replacer or a control diet. So in that sense, we get now 4 groups. Group 1 is the asphyxia group, asphyxia meaning that they got too little oxygen during birth. So group 1 got too little oxygen and then the colostrum replacer. Group 2 was asphyxia plus control diet. The third group was a control group getting the colostrum replacer, and the final group, the fourth group, was the control group getting the control diet. And then we looked at these organ functions: brain, immune system, liver, and kidney, and intestine. And what we find is that when we look at survival, just crude data looking at survival, we find that in the 2 stable lines there, over 60 hours after birth, the survival is higher, much higher, for the ones that received the colostrum replacer. Those are the 2 stable lines in the top, whereas the 2 groups that did not receive the colostrum replacer, they had a poorer survival and poor rest for the ones that were asphyxic also. So indicating that this colostrum replacer had quite a substantial effect on survival. And then we looked at a number of endpoints, including immunity. This is now data indicating the level of antibodies in the piglets after receiving these diets. And that's not surprising because the ones receiving the colostrum replacer have only are the only ones receiving the pig antibodies. So not surprising, but what is more interesting is when we look at an indicator of intestinal function, we find that one of the indicators of how the intestine works is what we refer to as the permeability of the intestine, meaning that if the intestine is very permeable, it's a poor intestine. If it's low permeable, it's a well-working intestine. And what we find is that the 2 lower bars there to the right indicates that the 2 groups receiving the colostrum replacer had the lowest permeability of the intestine. So the intestine was more solid, better integrity of the intestine, and there's a number of other data to really substantiate that point. So we have looked a lot into different colostrum replacers, and other people have also studied whether little pigs, little runt piglets can absorb material from a colostrum replacer. And this is some old data from a Swedish group that show that in the red bar and the green bar, that small pigs are very capable of absorbing antibodies from colostrum compared with siblings in the control group there, in the white group to the left. So in other words, small pigs, even though they have higher mortality, it doesn't mean that their intestine is not working. They have a well-working intestine, but they die from other reasons. So as long as we know that, we can maybe supply them with a colostrum replacer, and their intestine will work well, and they can survive if we give them the right circumstances. And we have also, under farming conditions, made one study where we took the colostrum replacer and we gave 2 boluses of colostrum replacer into the mouth, 15 milliliters per kilogram during the first day after birth, and let them be with the sow, and we find that that is enough to actually improve survival, corresponding to 1 pig per år så, per sow year. Yes, sow. This was about colostrum replacer, but of course, getting nutrients and getting immunity from mother's colostrum or a colostrum replacer is not the only thing that matters for survival. There are other things that also matter, and we have over the last couple of years been interested in the process after birth where pigs are born, and then they are born into the farrowing pen, and they will quickly ingest feces and dirt from the pig pen, and they will ingest several grams of dirt from the skin of the mother and from the dirt from the pig pen and feces from the mother. So quite rapidly, there will be millions and billions of microorganisms in the intestine. And sometimes that is fine, and sometimes it leads to infections and diarrhea. So we have been interested in trying to understand this better and seeing whether we could find ways to improve this colonization of the intestine with microorganisms. And we really use the concept that it's well known from humans that in humans suffering from certain conditions, it's helpful to get feces from another person. Maybe you've heard about it in the press. It's called fecal transplantation. You take feces from one healthy donor and you give it to a recipient that is suffering from some sort of condition. And this is a very old principle in human medicine, and we try to apply it also to newborn pigs from the perspective that when they're born, their intestine is sterile, and if we could supply them with microorganisms that were beneficial, maybe this would be a way to improve intestinal function. And one way to show it was to give it to cesarean-derived newborn pigs, and we could show that when we look at a condition called necrotizing enterocolitis, this is a very dramatic inflammation of the small and the large intestine in newborn infants and also in newborn preterm piglets, we could bring down the number of cases from 10 out of 20 in the control group to 2 out of 16 in the ones that received feces from a donor. So they were more protected, in other words. And we have kept working with this, and we are now currently trying to implement this at Rigshospital, the state hospital in Copenhagen, to see if we can improve intestinal function of newborn human infants. We also went onto a farming condition and looked at this concept, and we took sow feces and we filtered it through a small filter, and then you remove all the bacteria and you remove fungi and parasites and large particles, and you end up with this yellow liquid that contains things that are beneficial to the intestine. And we gave that to 115 newborn pigs the first few days after birth, and we compared that with another 150 that received a placebo solution. And the mortality was quite a lot lower for the ones that got this treatment. The study was all about diarrhea, so our main outcome is really diarrhea, and we looked at diarrhea incidences from birth to 41 days after birth, with a weaning process taking place on day 28, and we found that even after weaning, there's a lower frequency of weaning diarrhea in the ones that received the fecal filtrate transplant, FFT abbreviated. So the red bars there indicating that they had lower incidences compared with those that received the placebo treatment. So even though it was given after birth, only a few days, it had a lasting effect even to after weaning. So with this, I think I'll get ready to round off, and I don't know how much time I have, Paul, but just a few concluding remarks. I would argue that all pigs that are, almost all pigs that are born alive have a potential for survival. So of course, this is utopia and it's unrealistic, but if we really want to do something about survival, we have to also be a little bit unrealistic sometimes. So just knowing that there is, from a biological standpoint, a very large potential for survival amongst the ones that are born alive, that is helpful. And then I would argue that we can only, and I mean only, we can only really improve survival if we take the weakest newborn away from the sow transiently into a safe environment, maybe inside the farrowing pen, but in a safe confinement where they are in safety of crushing, they are in safety of infection, safety from starvation, and they should have ad libitum access to what we define here as a colostrum replacer. So under those conditions, under the right thermal conditions and being in safety away from the mother a little bit, maybe 48 hours, I think that could be a way to secure survival quite substantially. At least that's what we are hoping. And we have shown that if we can define a real swine-specific colostrum replacer, we can correct birth acidosis. We have also shown, and I didn't show you here today, but we have in multiple experiments showed that we can also correct some degree of prematurity. We cannot correct small body weight, but we can make them stable and make them more strong, so they, when we let them back to the sow, they have higher chances of finding a teat and being able to grow by being together with the sow. Finally, this concept of fecal transplant. It's something that is, from a biological standpoint, very interesting, but as of now, it's not legal. It's not legal to feed feces to pigs. And we have investigated this with the Danish food safety authorities and also with the European food safety authorities and tried to argue why this is a bit silly, that we cannot be allowed to do this because they ingest feces anyway in the farrowing pen. But as of now, it looks as if what we need to do is refine this further and try to develop some commercial type product that can be used for this purpose. So these are the points, and with this I will say thank you for your attention and also give acknowledgements to all the people in my group. This is an old picture. I even had hair back then. So if you have a chance to come to Copenhagen, please feel free to drop by and have a cup of coffee with me. Thank you. Yeah.
And I will not push you away, Thomas, but thank you for a very nice presentation. And still I got the app here, so if any questions out there in the country, you can write me a chat and I will make the question for Thomas. It is a very interesting area, this taking care of these small piglets and these searching for products, colostrum replacers, that is really an area where there's a great potential to make better results. But also this looking at the microbiome, if we could do something good for those very small ones, changing their microbiome, I think that's an area that we will see in the future, a lot more research in this area. But You make a very nice job here in your group, and always it's interesting to hear about it. So thank you to Thomas, and still, of course, it's able to make questions also after Sanne's presentation. We can also have questions for Thomas as well. Any questions in this group right now? Otherwise, we continue to Sanne. And I think right now, no questions in my chat. So welcome to you, Sanne.
Thank you. And luckily, Thomas and I are not disagreeing too much on the stuff we're going to talk about, but Thomas is very scientific and mine is a bit more out in the barn. So this is tips and tricks for you guys to take home and maybe implement a bit more than Thomas is with the newborn in small boxes, you know. Yeah. Is mine ready? Yep. Almost. Beautiful picture. But I can start talking because we're going to talk about these small piglets on the farm and how we make them survive. So we know that 70% of the pigs that die in the fairing section is below 4 days of age. So we focus on these 4 days and we have a better chance of getting a good survival in the farm. So we look after the sow and the sow looks after the piglets. But with these newborn, very small piglets, it's a bit different because this is out of the sow's range. She can't do anything about it. So that's what we're going to talk about. And I'm a bit in a hurry because I have a lot to say, so I'm talking a bit fast. Tell me if I'm talking too fast and I'll slow down. So the most important things for the survival rate is the temperature of the piglets and the energy that they bring into the world, but also the energy that they absorb and what we give them. And this depends on the piglet size. Because when we see these small piglets in the pen, if they lack energy, then they become cold, they get crushed, or the other way around. If they get cold, they won't get any energy, then they can't go to the corner and get heat, and you know, it's a bad vicious circle. This is a bit long-haired, but they have divided the pigs in this study into 2 groups, very small and a bit small, and then they have taken their temperature, put them into 2 boxes again, very low or a bit low temperature, and they have measured their blood sugar, very low or a little bit low. And what we see is that in the box with the low birth weight, we have 80% dead. So that means it's a very high risk when you are a low body weight piglet. If we then look at the temperature, it's 7 out of 9, but these 7 are all in the box with the small piglets. And the same with the low blood sugar. A lot of them, or all the dead, are in the box with the low body weight. So if you ask me, we need to look at the body weight. And I know Thomas said there's not a lot to do, but I beg to differ. So, because when we look at the size of the piglets, we know that when they are less than 500 grams, we might as well just kill them because they all die almost. But why is that? This is some measurements I did the previous month, where I did measurements on 2 farms. The blue dots are from one farm, the red dots are from another. We have the weight in grams out of the x-axis and the temperature of the piglets up the y-axis. And as you can see, there is a correlation, so it goes together. If the piglet is small, they have a higher chance or higher risk of being cold or colder than their brothers and sisters. The thing with these 2 farms or these 2 measurements was that on farm A, the blue dots, I did the measurements straight from the corner. So the piglets had been in the corner for 30, 45 minutes. And the red dots are from a farm where they were out with the sow. So they were laying on the floor and they had been laying there for half an hour, 45 minutes. And you can see here that they have a degree lower body temperature when they are out with the sow. So just the change in environment is such a big difference. And that's why we want them to be in the corner. Because when they are cold, and you can see a lot of them actually are below 38 degrees, and that is where they start losing their ability to move as fast. So Yeah, so the correlation between size and temperature and importance of being a hot little pig. Not hot like that, but you know. Okay, so what is the consequence of being cold? If we have a cold pig, the pig can't move as fast, it can't get out of the way if the sow lays down. But the other thing is, if it becomes very cold, they won't go and drink milk, and then their blood sugar goes down, and then you have that vicious circle, right? So, what do we do to get the best start in life? First, we'll look at size. What can we do with size? You know, when we put the sows, take the sows from insemination out to pregnancy stable, she goes from around 3 feeding units in insemination, and she goes into pregnancy stable, she goes to around 2.3 feed units per day. And then, in the end, when the fetus starts to grow, we put her up again to around 3.5. The thing is that in this period, you know, in the first 4 weeks, nothing really happens, or a lot happens, but nothing that depends on the energy that she ingests. But in the middle of the gestation, in the middle of pregnancy, where we put her to 2.3, that is only kind of for her to survive, for her own needs to be met. And in that period, we always thought, well, the piglets are not growing, so that is probably good enough. But in this period, we have the placenta growing, you know, the nutrients for the piglets. And is it enough that she only gets just what she needs to survive? Or do we need to look into another model in this period? Because we see a strong correlation between the size of the placenta and the size of the piglets being born. So, do we have the optimal growth of this placenta, or do we need to look into another model? So this is what it looks like now, 3, 2.3, and then 3.5. This new model says that we start her out with 2.9, then she goes to, we only reduce her to 2.5 instead of 2.3. And then she ends up on around 2.9. Is this a better distribution of energy? It probably could be. This means a little bit lower feed use per sow per year or per pregnancy, because we don't put her all the way down, but we don't give her the high amount. So we use a little bit less, so we won't get fat sows. That would be my thing if they used more feed per sow. But in this case, they won't use more. It will be the same use. We haven't got any data on this, but we heard from farms that have tried it that they see more equal size pigs. They have less of these micro pigs where they are very weak, so they are stronger. And then especially in farms with floor feeding, that you get more calm sows in pregnancy because there's more food to be shared, so they won't have to fight as much as they normally do. So this is very interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing more farms testing this off and seeing if it has the same results in other farms. Yeah. And this box shouldn't have been there. I should have pushed and then it should have come on. But when did you last check the weight of your food? Or when did anybody of you guys do that? Because it actually has a lot of, it's really important, because normally I have I have weighed a lot of food in my time, and I have weighted from 1 liter from 500 grams to 700 grams, anything in between, maybe even more than 700. And if it weighs 550 grams, 1 liter, then when she gets 2 times 2.3 liters, she will get 2.5 kilos. But if it weighs 700 grams, she gets 3.2. There's a big, big difference with 17 weeks of pregnancy, depending on what the feed weighs. So what I would like you to do, if it's been a long time since you weighed the food last, then go home and put 3 of these boxes on 1 on 1, 1 on 3, and 1 on 5, and then calculate the average weight of 1 kilo. And then you will know how much your sows are getting. This is especially important when we change into new grain, or if you change components, so barley into oat or whatever. Yeah. This is something brand new. This is a feed additive called L-arginine. This is an amino acid, and we have a farm that have tested this L-arginine, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. We know from human medicine that it's good for building muscle, it's good for the immune system, and it's good for reproduction. And in pig production, we could transfer it into a better blood flow through the uterus, and because of this, better sized piglets, less of these micro pigs, and higher birth weight, stronger piglets. And we have an Italian study that supports this. So Mette and Anders Lundsgaard, they have tried it since February 24, so from this year. So they had their first pharynx in May. And what they saw was stronger piglets, especially with the small piglets. They saw that they were stronger. That meant that they had higher success rate with their micro amesows, where you collect all the small. They had a higher success with that, lower mortality, and then actually they saw as a bonus that their amount of pigs with Brock hernia, was half. That was really interesting. It's used as an additive, as I said, so around 30 or 40 grams per sow per day from weaning until day 35 of pregnancy. And we have started up a big trial with DLG and Rilofos, and then Lars Hansen, one of our farmers here on Fyn. And what they do is they take 2 weeks without this amino acid, then they have 4 weeks with this amino acid, and then 2 weeks without it again. And they will register a lot of different factors. So live-born, dead-born, birth weight, pigs with this hernia, Brock, and mortality. We haven't seen any results yet, but I'm really interested to see if they will get the same results as Mette and Anders did. Yeah. So we checked off with the size. So we go on to this. In my opinion, that the long pharynx will lead to more weak piglets. So as Thomas said, when they are in the uterus and the birth is going on, there's a lot of these pressures. When they have contractions, the pressure of the uterus will block the umbilical cord, and that will make them lack oxygen. Sometimes also the umbilical cord will break, so they will bleed a little bit. That can also cause oxygen lack. In human medicine, we hear this, I don't know if you heard it, but they give newborn babies an APGAR score. It's where they score the baby in color and how they breathe and how they move. And the higher a score, the better. And if you see here, they also do it with piglets. So this is the birth order on the x-axis and then the APGAR score on the y-axis. So the further we get in the pharynx, the lower APGAR score the pigs get. So the less and less strong and vital the pigs are when they are born. And that also, for me, correlates with this lack of oxygen. This graph shows the piglet's birth order on the x-axis and the interval, so the time between each pig being born on the y-axis. And as you can see, when we come to pig number 16, the interval between the piglets go up. So when we come to 16 piglets, the longer the pharynx will be because it's longer and longer between each piglet. So when you come to 16 piglets, you really need to be extra careful when you do the check of the sows. Here we have the total time from first born piglet to the last born piglet. So the pharynx length in total, and then the chances or the probability of survival on the y-axis. And as you can see, the longer the pharynx is, the less likely the pigs are to survive. So what can we do to help the sow in this situation where we have the long pharynx? So we need to give her some energy to make sure that she can actually push out the piglets, optimize the passage so the piglets can actually come out, and look after the sows. That's our job, right? So I know this is Danish. I'll translate it into English. It's because it's not my drawing. But what is the sow's need in this period? She needs energy to grow the last part of the piglets. She needs to develop udders. She needs to produce colostrum and milk. She needs to farrow. She needs to make a nest. She still uses a lot of energy to move around stuff. And it's in this transition period that we need to look at the feeding strategy for the sows. So in this, the first line is how much food they get. Then the next is how long the farrowing is, how much farrowing help they get in percent, and then the dead-born in percent in the lower. And as you can see, it's between 3.7 and 4.3 that we have the optimal. So the optimal farrowing is around 4.1 kilo per day per sow. If she doesn't get enough, she doesn't have the energy to push out the piglets. If she gets too much, she gets constipated, you know, where she has too much feces in the back of the intestine. Then we need to have a feed that has between 5.3 and 5.4 grams of lysine in the per feed unit. Because if we get too high, you know, the food that the sows get in farrowing section is often much higher than this, often around 7 grams of lysine. If they get too much protein, they will use their energy to change this protein into something they can use. And in this process, they will have less energy to farrow. So reducing the amount of protein in the food to 5.3 or 5.4 will help her have a better farrowing. So we need this transition feed where we mix either pregnancy food and farrowing food, or mix in some barley or something to make it less strong in cetaceans. Yeah. So if we don't want her to have constipation and we want her to have energy, we need to make the feces soft, and we want her to have extra energy for the farrowing. So we have this recipe called 136. So it's 1 kilo of sodaline. This is an oral painkiller in powder. Then 3 kilos of glaubersalt, which gives her soft feces. And then 6 kilos of dextrose, which gives her energy. And if you then give 100 grams per sow per day, from 2 days before farrowing to the day after farrowing, it will smooth her farrowing a lot. Surveillance of the farrowing sows. So when it's piglets up to piglet number 3, we can easily give her an hour. So put your clock to 1 hour and an alarm will go off. But often you will have a lot of sows farrowing, right? So I would recommend get a watch with an alarm, put it to half an hour. So every half an hour you need to go around, check that she got new piglets. If not, then you do a very careful or very careful examination to check if she has any piglets she needs help with. And then a lot of farms are starting to say goodnight to the sows, so they go in and just have a last check. A last check in the evening, just to check if there's any having problems in the farm. Yeah. So long farrowing, weak piglets. Oh, I need to speak fast. So cold piglets are also weak piglets. So we have this problem in the farm. We have the sows that need between 15 and 26 degrees. The piglets, they need a lot higher, 32, 34 maybe even. So what we do is we have this transition in the farrowing section for the sows in the room that is start with 25 and then go down gradually to 18 degrees 10 days after farrowing. And in this period we have the piglets in the corner where we have the floor heating, and we have a corner, this board we put up. So in this corner we have 34 to 36 degrees. Then after day 4 we can remove the board so the piglets get a bit more air and reduce the temperature to around 32. And then we can turn off the floor heating when they become around 14 days. And if you have teams that are a bit small, then you can put the board back and give them a bit more heat in the corner. But remember to check the floor heating. You'll be surprised how many times I've gone to a farm and seen all the pigs laying in the corner with their bum out. And when I feel the floor, it's completely cold, or maybe only 25 degrees. So make sure the floor heating is running, and 31 degrees is fine, but then we need to turn on the lamp, and we do that before farrowing, 1 to 2 days before, because then the corner is nice and hot when the pigs are born. And make sure you have enough lamps. It's annoying to have to go in and steal lamps from the bigger pigs if they still need it, because you need it for the newborn. So make sure you have enough. And lamps with a 150 or 175 watt bulb is super for the small, because they need more heat. So for the micro teams, you have a hotter lamp. So I did some tests myself, and on the first day I was very optimistic. I thought I could save all the piglets. On day 3 I was a bit more pessimistic because I could see from the first 2 days that a lot of the piglets that I tried saving, they were out of reach. And I'll explain that. Because I gave them, okay, I forgot to translate. It means hot sugar water. So I heated up some sugar water just to around 37, 38 degrees and gave it subcutaneously, so under the skin, just in the neck. And then I put the pigs under a 250 lamp, and that is really hot. So this is, you can see the blue line in the bottom that is straight, that says 34. If the piglets are less than 34 degrees, when I collected them, they were out of reach, because they would never survive. They would always just be slow and never standing up. 37.5, between 34 and 37.5, these could be saved. We need to do something, but they could be saved. And then 40 degrees was kind of the maximum. If they are more than 40 degrees, they get bad again. So you can see each line going up up is a piglet where I measured the temperature every 15 minutes. And what I saw was that in an hour, under the 250 watt lamp, they were almost all at 37.5. So I would say if you need to do something for these small ones, give them sugar and then put them under the lamp for an hour if it's a 250. If it's a 150 or 175, just wait until they start moving around. But this 250 is so hot that they'll go over 40 really fast after more than an hour. So this graph shows that low blood sugar is dangerous for the little pig, because it's not as dangerous to be cold if you are full. So if the piglet is full, it's okay to be cold, but the other way around is not good. So the smallest who gets a chance, they should have an energy supplement, for example, glucose, and they should be put under a good heating lamp, either this 250 for an hour, no longer, or one of the a bit 150, 175, until they show that they have enough power to go outside. Okay, so energy at birth or at uptake, or what we give them. So in 2016, Sigge showed that 38% of piglets under 1 kilo had a low blood sugar. This resulted in higher mortality when they had low blood sugar. But they showed that we could normalize this blood sugar by giving the piglets 1 gram of glucose in the mouth 2 times before we start mixing out the piglets. So how do we do that? You can mix 200 grams of glucose. You can buy that at the pharmacy. So you mix 200 grams of this in 1 liter of water, and then you give 5 milliliters per piglet 2 times per day. So when you pick them up and put them under the lamp, and then again when they start showing energy, you can give them 1 shot more and then put them to the sow. This can also go, it's not only the small ones and the ones that are really weak, but if you see any that is just a little bit slow, give them some energy and put them in the corner, because they will quickly show you if they are strong enough to go out I had that box, and the strongest ones, they just jumped. So they took off by themselves. I didn't have to lift them. Yeah. Then, when you sort out the litters, put these small ones that you have had in a box or whatever, put them to a sow that is the most recent to farrow, because of course you will have the highest amount of colostrum. So you put them, the smallest, to this sow, and if any piglets die, you fill up. You probably already do that, and you can do that until 48 hours after farrowing. And if it doesn't change, it doesn't work later, then of course you change the teams. But in that case, you will have given the piglets the best chance of getting the best colostrum possible. So what's happening here? This is something I see often when I go out on the farms. The first picture on the left hand, the sow is laying on the udder. They are trying to split milk, these piglets. The sow is laying there on the udder, not giving any milk. On the right-hand side, there are way too many piglets out. They will fight for the teats. We are trying to give a chance to the smallest. In this case, there's way too many out. And here they have given, she has already given milk, and the piglets are just laying outside getting cold. You saw the change in temperature, and with the small piglets, the change will probably be even bigger. So, what do we do? This split milking, how do we do it the best way possible? First of all, we make sure that the piglets are warm, both before and after we split milk. We make sure the split is as short as possible, and we make sure that the milk is there when the piglets are there. And how do we do this? We do a turbo split. This means that we give the sow painkiller, we put the piglets in the corner, we let the sow get her food, she lays down. This takes about half an hour. This means that the painkiller is working, and at that point, we take the 10 or 12 of the smallest piglets out and place them by the sow, and we gently give her 2 milliliters of oxytocin. And you know this oxytocin, it works like this. So in 30 seconds, 1 minute, the milk would start flowing, and the piglets will be there. Then the piglets get milk for 20 minutes, and we put them back in the corner. Only for 5 minutes or something like that. Then you open up, and the big ones will go out and drink, and the small ones will stay in the corner. But in this case, we will make sure that the piglets are warm, both before and after. We will make sure that the milk is there. And we will optimize the process in that way. This is some earlier trials I did where we did a normal split and we did what I call the turbo. And you can see this is the percent of these 10 piglets that I took out if I weighed them before and after the split. And in this case, when we did a normal split without oxytocin, 7 out of 9 of these teams didn't get any milk. It was 8 out of 9 when we did the split milking in 30 minutes. So often we don't give the piglets any milk. They're just out there getting colder. But when we did this turbo split, the success was much bigger. They got a lot of milk in their stomachs. And not a lot of the teams didn't get any milk. And where do the piglets get the most milk? Of course, on the left hand, because when the sow is on her udder, they won't get any. And I showed that because I made a comment in my registrations. Every time I saw a sow laying on her teats while I did the split, I made a comment. And in the cases where there was a comment on the way she was laying, they only gained 90 grams. Compared to the sows that didn't have any comments, they gained 140 grams per team. Yeah. So, summary. The feeding in pregnancy, the new model, the Porcus model, whatever, where we don't reduce them as much, could lead to bigger piglets at birth. Check the weight of the food. Then this L-arginine, the new amino acid, will be really interesting to see the results of the test. When we optimize the farrowing, 4.1 kilo the week before farrowing, and in this feed we want to reduce the lysine to 5.4 grams. And think in this transition feed where they get a food that is less less protein. Then we optimize the passage by using this 136 with painkiller, glauber salt, and dextrose. And we monitor the fairing. And I know 30 minutes is almost nothing. You can almost only do a round and then castrate one team, and then you have to go back again. So in the period where the sows are fairing, you need to be really careful that a lot of time doesn't go by. The temperature, check the floor heating, turn on the lamps, and use the incubator or the corner with an extra hot lamp for the smallest, and then give this energy supplement, and then try this turbo split, because in my opinion, it works really, really well. Yeah, so let's save those piglets.
Okay, thank you very much, Sanne. Almost in time. That's very nice. I gave you an extra 5 minutes. You asked for that, so that was fine. Very interesting, and I hope you got some nice tips and tricks to bring home. This should be a practical approach for you, so that you get some ideas and some tricks to take back home and use already tomorrow back home. I need to check. I see no questions from out there so far, but I had one question. I don't know if it's for Thomas or for Sanne, but making these nice environments in the corner, putting the small ones there with an extra lamp, isn't it important that these very small ones has got some other pigs? It needs a small room, other pigs, so they are very tight, close to each other. They can stimulate each other. Isn't that also a very good way to raise the temperature on these small piglets? So, yeah. Could Thomas maybe make an answer? Because I think it's maybe not only the heat coming from outside, but maybe if we can stimulate the small piglets to make an extra production of heat from inside, also that should be maybe. Do you have a comment?
Just a comment on that. We have actually compared the effect of being single-housed versus being housed together with somebody, and that's in favor of being housed together with somebody. So the feeling of skin-to-skin contact is important for little piglets. It's also important for human babies. So in previous times, it was tradition to take weak infants away from the mother and put into an incubator. But now they realize it's better to put it on the chest of the mother for a reason that is not completely understood. But that skin-to-skin contact is important for humans, and it's also important for pigs. So the construction of that incubator-like thing that we need under farrowing conditions is something that we have tried to work with a private company to try and design. So we have applied for a larger grant to really see if we can make something that is applicable under farming conditions, and then also combined with this colostrum replacer that I was talking about.
Okay, that's interesting. I guess all of us like skin-to-skin contact. Well, I need to say that. Well, I think any questions from here? And so far I see no one on the chat. So if that's the case, I would like to say thank you to Thomas and Sanne. Very nice presentations, and I really hope both out there and in this room, I hope you got some good ideas to bring home, and we will raise the survival of these small piglets. And also, hopefully, we will in the future have less ones of these very small ones. Perhaps we can do something about it. I'm pretty sure that in maybe not next time, but after that again, I'm pretty sure we will hear more about this L-arginine that Sanne was talking about. That is indeed interesting. But from here, I will say thank you for today and have a nice trip home then. Okay.